It being 6 o'clock, I'll call to order the meeting of the Carver Redevelopment Authority for August 23rd. We have several people here that we're going to open up the meeting talking about the urban renewal project. And we're getting kind of close where we want to discuss we want to get as much factual information out there as possible. And one of the biggest things that we've been dealing with is fire and safety for a proposed building. So we've been kind of working with the chief and Hillwood, who's the named developer. And at this time, it's just kind of an opening introduction to what our fire chief is thinking about and what Hillwood's thinking about. And we needed to get this more out in the open, I think. So we've invited Chief Weston here today, and he's always welcome at all of our meetings anyway. And Hillwood braved whatever hurricane that was coming up the East Coast yesterday. And there's a dozen New England, it just simply went someplace else.
For now.
For now. But and we welcome them. And I think first I'm gonna ask to have the chief speak if he wouldn't mind. If you want to.
Sure, I just a couple words. I'm actually very interested to see what Hillwood has to present tonight. As the fire chief, I've sat in on quite a few meetings, all the way back starting from, I think it was in September, when a project was originally proposed. I don't think necessarily by yourselves, by Hillwood, but obviously the owner of the parcel. So we have seen different stages of the project. We know that through Hillwood, and I think the property owner, deadlines are trying to be set for a possible town meeting with zoning changes to be made in that meeting. In order for us to have, to feel comfortable at that town meeting and all the board presentations that will go along prior to that, we want to be in a position that we feel as we represent public safety for the people that work there, people that will visit there, and also our own firefighters. Right now, the information that has been provided, I wouldn't say is substantial enough or complete enough to address our concerns. And I think we want to get there, and we want to try to make an honest effort to get there. But through the RDA, we've expressed our concerns that we're not there, and we're really not even close to being there. We've put a lot of time and energy in researching distribution facilities through many consultations with fire chiefs, deputy fire chiefs, retired commissioners, retired state fire marshals, and professionals that have done presentations on warehouse fire safety. So we have been doing our homework. I won't say we are anywhere near the expertise that we should have, or I'm not going to claim to be. But I do think we come with a fair amount of common sense, and we do have a fair amount of knowledge of actually working large incidents. We have had emergency incidents in facilities, I would say close to this size in Rochester. We were very involved in for over 5 days. And so we kind of lived some of those things firsthand and seen what can happen and what might happen. We do live in a community, obviously, with no adequate water for fire suppression. So that is a very big deal for us on how we're going to operate. Our department is set up mainly, as a suppression system, but our main people we serve, 2.5-story residential houses and, some larger commercial complexes, but of a scale far smaller than this, okay? Those facilities, some of them are sprinkled, or most of them are sprinkled, and have large water capacities underneath them for storage to help us mitigate those hazards. There are also facilities that are very, again, certainly far smaller than this, and certainly don't have the height that's projected on any of these projects. I'm not saying we can't get to a point where we can feel more comfortable about this project, but again, right now, we do not. We understand that there are three entities kind of involved in this project. You have an owner, a buyer, and obviously a town, in which, you know, it's hard enough in these projects to work with just a town and a developer, never mind having three entities all mixed up. And then when timelines and dates are established, I feel very strongly that everyone has to be very satisfied to positively move forward. I think there has been kind of a breakdown in the dialogue between the parties, I would say. I'm not going to point to specific parties, and certainly the fire department. I don't know how that's evolving with the other public safety departments. But I think that breakdown in dialogue based on some misinformation and I think not an urgency to try to solve some of that information is just leading to, is going to be detrimental to the project. And again, I've lived in town my whole life. I care about this town. I'm starting to care about this project. So I really want to keep my personal feelings and my taxpayer feelings out of this and just address it as a public safety fire chief. And right now, we're just not comfortable where we need to be. So with full disclosure, I did have a conversation with Matt from Hillwood late last week. Depending on how this meeting went, we were going to agree to have a follow-up meeting at the fire station tomorrow to try to get into maybe some more technical aspects of where we need to be in order to feel a little more comfortable with public safety. So that's kind of my 5-minute speech. I'll just end it with, we have been working very closely with the RDA and the other boards in town, and we show each other a lot of respect in our different disciplines, and we'll continue to do that. So any meetings that we have, you know, we do communicate with the RDA and obviously the town administrator, just to make sure that we remain on the same page, and, you know, one department isn't hearing something that is affecting the other department, and eventually will affect you as a project, I think. So I think I'll stop right there, and I'll certainly answer any questions you have, but I certainly don't want to stop your presentation for right now, so thank you.
Thank you, Chief. I think I speak for the whole RDA, knowing that as we view this big project, and for anyone who's listening who's not sure where this big project is, it's located on the corner of Route 44 and Montello Street, behind where Aubuchon is, and it's the old, you know, there's 200 and some odd acres of, I usually refer to it as a wasteland, but it has apparently great promise. But it was the site of 2 landfills and sewage treatment plant and stump dump, and it's been bought up over the years by Route 44 Development, and they have a plan to develop it as a distribution center of some sort. At town meeting several years ago, we designated this as a green business park. So there is allowed use of a distribution center. This one is bigger than the allowed use. It's taller, but it's more state-of-the-art, and it's likely to be much more of an advantage to the town, but we all have to be there. And the biggest concern when we saw the idea that it would now be taller than the 40 feet that's allowed there, we went immediately to fire and safety. We haven't got a ladder that tall. We don't have any way of putting out a fire that has, you know, what could be, I don't know, several hundred trucks at one time in the parking lot, loading or unloading. And these are all questions that have to be answered to the satisfaction of the boards in town, and certainly to fire and safety. And as we kind of move into a little bit more of, not crunch time, but we need to get a little bit more into the weeds in this as to what's going to be there, how it's going to perform, what are the role of the RDA, what's the role of the planning board, and certainly what's the role of fire and safety. Traffic studies are being done, traffic improvements are being made in that area. And that's all part of the reason that we have to all stay together, all stay on the same page, all stay in communication. I mean, breakdowns in communication cause issues, and we're not at a point where we need any kind of, those kind of issues at this point. Thank you, Chief, for coming tonight and speaking again so eloquently on behalf of the fire and safety for the cars and trucks and people who will be working there, and just simply the idea of a building like this in town, you know, serving, providing revenue, providing jobs, providing possibly ancillary benefits, but it has to be safe and it has to meet the criterion that the town sets forth. So, is there anybody else who'd like to say anything from?
Not at this point, I'm sure I will, but
Oh,
me be quiet, are you serious?
that can't possibly. So I'll turn the floor over to Hillwood if you'd like to introduce yourselves formally again. I know you've attended a few of our meetings. Oh, it's gone again.
When he gets ready, we'll just have to work to keep it alive. I'll just keep hitting.
Get a clicker.
Yeah.
Let me get a remote.
But, Mac, do you want to speak?
Yeah, I'll start. Sharon, thank you. Chief, thank you for your comments. Matt Heatsey with Hillwood. I'm here with Gary Frederick of Hillwood, Matt Smith with Bowler Engineering, our civil engineer, and Mike Resnick with Janney & Associates, our fire protection consultant. We, as you know, we've spent about 3 to 4 months working on this site now, and really focused on the due diligence aspects of it. And as you can imagine, there are a lot of things that have to be figured out on this site. Fire protection certainly is one of them, and admittedly, maybe not enough focus on that early on as the amount of effort we put into some other things. So definitely appreciate the chief's comments. We certainly echo the feeling on public safety. We're confident based on the studies that we've done so far, and what we think is suitable to be built here, that we can come up with a system that's going to make everybody happy, meet building codes and provide the level of safety that you're looking for. And I think that it'll be good to be able to get in a little bit more detail, answer some specific questions, and provide better answers to issues that have been raised by your group so far. So I look forward to that opportunity tomorrow. As far as communication goes, I think that this is a Hillwood project. Kind of from this point forward, as far as we're concerned, it's not a Route 44 project. Certainly we're going to have, we've got a partnership and we'll be working together going forward, but we're really the ones that are responsible to get this done, and the ones that you guys need to be dealing with. So hopefully that's something that will
I think that's a very good point.
Yeah. And so, as we mentioned before, some of what we're trying to accomplish at this point is kind of tackling the big picture issue that we have, and that's the building height, the allowable building height, and some of the other minor elements of the zoning code that won't allow us to build what we think the market requires, and so we kind of got to, until we can get through that phase of the approvals, it's difficult to move forward into the specifics of the site plan review, submittal of a building permit, those kinds of things that you do once you know that you can build what it is, the type of warehouse and product that you need to build. So we've got to do a little bit better job providing more information. So whatever evaluations that need to be made in order to support that height increase, that everybody's comfortable being able to do that. And that's kind of our immediate goal. We've had conversations recently about public outreach, and that's in progress, and look forward to being able to revisit with your team in the near future to talk about what that looks like. And then, in the meantime, Matt's gonna kind of walk you through so some updates on the site plan and some of the things that have been done. But, we don't have a lot more specific in terms of the specific building, the specific user that might ultimately move into a building here one day. But again, I think there's more information we can provide to, hopefully get to a comfort level that everyone can live with. Thanks.
Thank you.
Great. I'm Matt Smith. I'm a professional engineer with Bowler Engineering, and you've seen me before. And thanks again for your time. We'll give a bit of an update on what the plan looks like, and it looks a lot like what it's looked like in the past. As Mac has said, we don't yet have specific users. We've looked at a lot of different options for the site that look a lot like what we're talking about here. I'm very confident that ultimately it will look like that, but we'll have a different amount of parking spaces and a different amount of truck spaces, and the building might be slightly bigger. But if we're talking about a 1.2 million square foot building or a 1.1 million square foot building, it's a big building that's going to look a lot like this. And if I showed you the before and after, you'd have to have a pretty keen eye to pick out what was different at the scale of what we're doing. But what I'd like to do is just walk you through the plan again. We've put together some cross sections because I've heard, hey, what does this look like? And we have some vantages for what the scale of this is, and have some other just building elevations from similar buildings so you can see what we're talking about, because there's been a lot of discussion on a 65-foot tall building, which it's not really a 65-foot tall building necessarily. We're just talking about having the ability to go up that high might be helpful. So if I could, I'll run you through, and thanks for restarting that again, Jim.
Can I just ask one question
Of
of Mac?
course.
Is it typical with Hillwood and other big development companies not to know who your end user is?
Absolutely,
Okay.
very common.
Let me take that one. I've been here before. I'm Gary Frederick. I'm the Senior VP, Executive VP Market Leader. So I've been doing this for Hillwood for over 22 years. I don't know, 2 or 3 dozen of these buildings probably throughout my career. It takes a few years to get one done. This is what we call a speculative development. Now, this building is of a class that can only be used by a fairly limited type of tenants. I mean, there's not hundreds of prospective tenants out there for this building. There's more like 10, quite frankly. I'm sure that it's common scuttlebutt that this is Amazon. Because Amazon is going crazy in Massachusetts and New England, and we're involved with several other Amazon projects in New England. But Amazon has competition. The other top 10 consumer product type companies are doing everything they can do within their capital constraints, within their human restraints, within their market constraints to compete with Amazon. So all of the other household names of where we shop or where we go online are also prime suspects for this type of building. But like I said, there's not a list of 100, there's maybe a list of 10, maybe 20 at the most. So it's going to be one of those type of people. Now, it's also going to be, we're just to give you a little more insight, and I promise I won't go on forever, but this is a big investment, and it's just like opening a shopping center, only way bigger. So when a shopping center opens, we all know that there's stores that aren't occupied. Some are, some aren't, and they're built on the expectation that somebody will come and rent that space. So it's a very similar situation where sometimes they're rented, sometimes they're not. This may very well be leased before we submit a building permit. But as we sit here today, I do not have a tenant. I wish I did, but I don't. but we're willing to advance the money to move this project forward, and we might even build the entire building without there being a tenant. But the e-commerce phenomenon, kind of driven by COVID, has created a high level of demand for these type of buildings, particularly in places like New England where there's a lot of people, and the Northeast. So I don't want to pull any punches that it very well could be Amazon, but it's not today. But it could very well be any one of the other household names that do the same thing that Amazon does. And that's where it's going to go. And we believe, and that's where we're putting our money on the line with the expectation that that will happen. But you know, we're going to get to know each other as we go through the process here. And I'm just not going to look you in the face and lie to you and tell you a story.
Well, I'd find out, so.
You'd find out, and I can't remember what I said 5 minutes ago, so between the two of those things, we're gonna get in a lot of trouble if I don't tell you the truth. And so, no tenant today. We might have a tenant a month from now, might have a tenant a year from now. I hope it's that soon, but as we sit here today, we do not have anybody signed up to take this building.
But it's typical of the industry not to, so. to
Very
build-
typical. Well,
Okay.
you have to, if you've got a site like Carver, sounds right away. If you've got that site and you haven't done any work to it, they're not gonna believe you. You've gotta have, it's a chicken or the egg kind of thing where you've gotta have some progress on the site. You've gotta have the proper zoning. You gotta have a plan for utilities, you gotta have a plan for life safety, you gotta have a plan for traffic. If you don't have those plans, they just go on to the next guy. You've got to, you can't hook one of these tenants from a standing start. It's just,
okay.
it's just not done, and you have to invest millions of dollars to get in the game.
Okay.
And that's what we do. I hope that makes some sense. I'm glad to answer questions. So I just wanted to address that one issue about the speculative development.
Thank you.
Great. So I'll just talk about what's proposed on the site again, which you've seen. I'll talk about the building height and what it typically is, and this will be some things that I don't think that the chief may have seen or focused in on, and not that that would change the opinion, but again, we've just been talking about a 65-foot building, which that's not really what we're expecting it to be. That's been a number that we've chosen to provide some buffer, because it depends on where you measure things from. It depends if you want to include equipment that's atop the building, and we're just being forthright with what we're trying to do, and we'll show you some examples of that. And then we have some cross sections of the site that will show you from various vantage points, what are you going to see? And I think you'll agree with me, it's almost surprising that you don't see that much of this. So you've seen this plan before, or something very similar to it. We have two buildings proposed, and I'll zoom out, but I thought this was helpful. We have 58 here off the screen, is 44 to the bottom. And then we have Montello Street, which currently comes in here. It's getting reconstructed, and the access to 58 or Main Street is shifting under the project that's about to happen pretty soon here. That's currently out to bid. What we're showing here is a 1.2 million square foot industrial warehouse distribution facility. And we've got a couple different access points along Montello Road. You like to separate the employee traffic from the truck traffic to the degree that you can. And this little looking parking lot in the front here is about 400 cars, just for reference. And we have a contemplated water tower. There is water that's going to be brought to the site that the North Carver Water District provides, but it doesn't have sufficient pressures for us or for the area around it. So we need to put in a water tower that's about 160 feet in height is what we're contemplating. We still have to go through all the math, but we've done the preliminary math, and that's the way that it works out. And then bear with me, this is not, yeah, almost had it. There you go. So I expanded out, again, we have 44 on the bottom here, as I was alleging would happen. And then we have a second building that's contemplated as 570,000 square feet. These numbers are very consistent with what went through the MEPA process under the urban renewal plan and the EIRs. It's just there's been different configurations on site, but it all looks very similar to kind of the history of what the project would include. And you can see there's trailer parking spaces and loading, which happens 4 feet below the actual finished floor, so that can make the building seem taller. And then you have, office entrances on this side of the building. You might have the same down here. You have office entrances here, and that is at grade. So what does one of those buildings look like? This is not for this project. This is another project, but they tend to look something like this, where you have loading, that's 4 feet lower along the sides, and that's on the two sides, running right to left on both of those buildings there. You get a decent looking office space, and then you have loading on the other side as well. And when we look at what those heights actually are, the way you measure height in Carver from a building height perspective is it's the height of the building on the street side. So you're allowed to have 40 feet. So the 4 feet that we have for the loading docks on the south and northerly side doesn't count to the building height, but we're just telling you this is the way it works, and we're being forthright with what the height of the building is. You won't be able to see this, but you'll have to trust me that what this shows is on the front of the building, which this is essentially here, and I'll show you in a second, Chief. The top of this parapet is 53 feet above grade, and then as you move down to the sides of it, it's 145 feet, or excuse me, 45 feet. 45 feet. 100. So it's based
We're
on
about to have a whole new discussion.
it's based on a finished floor elevation of 100. So pardon my math there. And then it cascades over. It's 53 feet here. It's 50 feet here. It's 49 feet, 47. Blah blah blah. When you go around the corner, you have that drop down the 4 feet, and then the whole run of this here would be 47 feet. And then when you stepped up here, it would go up to that 43 feet or whatever it is. And then there's elements of it that do get higher up to that 65-foot height.
So, Matt,
Yes, sir.
What the industry standard is 40 feet clear inside the building below the roof structure. So on the if you're inside the building, you go up and there's a deck, but there's 4 or 5 feet or more of girders and joists and stuff that hold the roof up. And so our customers want to know that they have a clear 40 feet operating window underneath the roof structure. And that translates into the external dimensions that Matt is describing. So that 40-foot clear, you could verify that independently through any industrial real estate broker or agent or whatever. But 40-foot clear is sort of that industry standard that we're trying to achieve.
Okay, not being visual, I'm sorry, but not being an architect or visual person. When you say 40-foot clear, I'm thinking of a big empty?
Big box,
In the
vertical.
middle,
I'm talking about
in the
40
inside the building?
inside the building,
Okay,
from the floor
from the floor to the
to
ceiling?
the bottom of the roof structure, to
Okay.
where the girders and joists are.
The ceiling,
Right. The
Right there.
effectively usable area,
okay.
because you can't stack or store stuff up in the roof joist. It's got to be below the bottom of the roof joist.
Okay,
So we didn't tell you any of that to try to say, therefore, there's nothing that we have to solve. We're just telling you that because I think there's some thought that, hey, this is a 65-foot tall building. What we're doing is we're seeking an amendment to the zoning to allow a height up to 65 feet, but really what we're looking at is something that's smaller than that in many ways, but doesn't change the discussion. We just wanted to show you what the...
So you're looking for a building height to allow ultimately for the 40-foot clear inside the building? So
Yes,
whether
sir.
it's 65 or 60 or 41, whatever that number is to create the 40 feet of usable space.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now,
And you end up having rooftop equipment, there's solar on top of this, you got the 4-foot drop, you got a parapet there, you got a user that we don't know specifically who it is, something's gonna come up, and we're saying, geez, if it's 65, that's gonna cover the situations we're dealing with. By and large, the height to the top of the roof is less than 50 feet from the outside.
I'd like to make one more
Yes,
clarification.
sir.
Is that many of you know that we are actively building a building in North Andover, Massachusetts. And that is a different animal. That building is right at 100 feet tall on the outside. So it is a different function. It's a very specialized automated building for Amazon. It's truly the state-of-the-art building, but it requires a 100-foot tall height restriction. That's not what we're not proposing that here, nor could we build that here if you went along with us on the 65-foot clear. So that isn't gonna happen here, it cannot happen here.
Okay.
Okay? So I just don't want to get confusion of saying, oh, Hillwood's building 100 feet in North Andover. They're telling us a story here, but that's not the case. That's a completely different facility.
Okay, good to know, thank
It
you.
does something different than what this one's going to do.
Any questions on any of that?
No, those are-
Okay, great, thank you. So then we've done a study on what does this look like from varying places, and bear with me for a moment. All right. So the first plan that you're going to see, that's a little bit much. It's a bunch of cross sections that we've cut through the building. This is our guide, and then each sheet will be one of these cross
Well, I'm good,
sections.
I don't know about you guys.
Right? There's going to be a quiz on this. We're going to show it off next. So we have sections coming through the building out to Route 44, and what we're going to see is it just gives a sense
Oh,
for
okay.
elevation from point to point. And we basically come east across Route 44, A to B to C to D, down onto Main Street, and then have a couple sections that cut back into the neighborhoods too. And the three things that you'll see from this are the building at 65 feet high, which we know it is not actually a 65 foot high rectangle, but that's how we're illustrating it, just so it's the worst case scenario. And then there's a water tower. That's that 160 feet in height that you can see from some places, but mostly you can't see it. So as we just kind of drive through or past the site, so this shows that section A, which is back, cutting through the basically the two buildings, and on the side you have a photo image of, hey, what are you going to see? And then on the bottom we have the relative elevations of everything. And what this shows is you won't see the buildings because you'll be looking at trees, but we've ghosted in those buildings beyond it, and from that vantage you would be able to see a water tower. And the reason is Route 44 is up at elevation 130 as we go through there, and we're looking at the finished floor elevation at about 92. So it's actually about 40 feet lower.
Right.
So you're not going to see it.
Are we gonna see the water tower from Route 44 when we get off?
If you're very careful, you will in one of these sections.
I figured you'd
So
say that.
I'll show you, but I was really pleasantly surprised when we went through this exercise. And we've built a model so we can kind of look at different spots. So if there's other vantages that are desirable, we can put those together too. So this shows just shifting further down 44, section BB, you can see the top of the building, and you can see this little speck here. Partially, you can see the top of the water tower, but I think you'd have to be looking for it to
And
see
that's
that.
as you approach the interchange, right?
That's, yes, and actually technically, it's taken from the eastbound lane.
Oh, okay.
So while we're showing this coming this way, it's taken
It's
from
taking
west-
going
from
west.
this
It's
side.
taking going west.
Westbound.
You can see more into the site
Yeah.
from that, so.
So you should be looking at the car in front of you. but-
You should be, yes,
Yeah.
yes. So, that's that. We come to the next section. This is looking into the site from neighborhood over in Plimpton here, where you see the building, again, is ghosted. You can't see it, it's all behind vegetation. Same thing along Route 44. And then the next one, as you come to the ramp, see if I can get this to catch up. As you're coming right past the ramp here, when you really should be looking at cars, you can see into the site and you can see some of this. And that shows that 65-foot high building again. So that's the spot where you see it the most.
I have a question.
Yes.
Just looking across the bogs over there.
Yes.
How well does vegetation cut down sound? The previous slide, or the one you say to Plimpton,
Yeah.
because that side where all those trucks are gonna be
Yep.
whirring around, how does it cut it down?
It cuts it down some. Sound is typically, it's related to sight. If you can't see something, you don't hear it as well.
Okay.
But it doesn't, it does still have sound. When we put together the ultimate design plans for this, we will do sound studies and all of that. But you're gonna have that with a 40-foot high building, a 30-foot high building.
It'll be the same trucks going in and out.
It's really independent
Yeah.
of the height that we're trying to talk through here. And again, you can see that, the tower over there. And again, this building that we're looking at, it's like, it's almost a half a mile off the road. So you can see it, but it's not close to you there.
So how do you get the water with pressure going from the street all the way in there with that little, where you can see the tower? I mean, that's a long way in.
Pumps.
Pumps? Okay.
And once that tower, and we still have to go through and permit this with the water district, but we've had discussions. Once that'll be beneficial to the entire system, because that will introduce the pressure that you need, because currently it only comes from pumps.
Okay.
in town. This just shows, as you come up Main Street, from the ramps, again, you can hardly see the tower in this little spot here. The buildings are behind the other buildings. And you
Does the
can't really
tower
see it.
say, "Welcome to Carver"?
Say whatever you want.
It can.
Um,
Carver means business. Isn't that what we used to say?
Carver needs business.
Means business, isn't that what we used to say?
But
Yes,
anyway.
yes.
So this is further down the street, looking back through the shopping mall on Main Street. Again, this is the one where you can see the tower the most. I'll zoom in on that a little bit.
That's a shopping mall.
Oh, so that's,
That's the old Shaw's, north, I'm running the
It
Plimpton line.
looks a lot better there than it does now.
So you can see
Wow,
the
okay.
tower
Oh, yeah.
up above it here, but the buildings are all back behind it, so it's just a small feature. And then we added this last slide, looking over from the neighborhood that's off of Toby Lane.
Oh, right, yeah.
What is that?
That's on the other side of Heather's Path.
Oh,
It's the
really?
one that comes in from the west.
Oh, okay.
So looking over there, again, you can't see, there's vegetation all in the way of what you'd be looking at. So it's not very visible from the surrounding areas. This is really, when you look at it, it's the ideal location, just from an impacts to what's around you for this sort of a use. And visually, it doesn't jump out. It's almost underwhelming when you see it, you're like, that's 65 feet.
Now, I was reading when you were talking with the chief, and there's a lot of pages, but you said you're gonna float some balloons for the corners of the building and also the tower. That's great. We need to have the CCAT people there so we can capture all that as a perspective. I'm sure you'll let us know when you're about ready to do all that.
We've essentially set the groundwork to do that, and we just want to coordinate what's the right time and way to do it. And then we'll take pictures of those, and we can superimpose that on some of the imagery, so it all comes together and makes sense. And I'm confident what you'll see, again, that's not well, it is much of the issue, is what's that building look like, and what's that 65 feet? It's not really the chief's issue that we're talking about here, but just from...
But it is a concern.
Sure.
When we've heard people talk about, you know, maybe not so much that they've noticed this wasteland, as I still continue to call it, back there, but it is a big building. When Shaw's went in the old Shaw's, the one that you took the picture from, that was a big building when that showed up. So I think the idea, people may have it in their heads that they're going to see the building as if it's laying out in front of a totally empty space in front of them. And these renderings, I mean, I'm finding these most helpful.
I think so, and we need to pull it together a little bit further. And we have some more modeling that we'll do that we can share. But it's going to show these same things. We know what it's going to look like.
The other thing too, the vegetation, you know, in Carver, we predominantly pine trees and everything. They don't lose any leaves. So come fall, it's not going to really look any different, I think, right?
It feels very different than the Cisco sightline. When you're driving down 44, I mean, that thing is
right there.
You can't miss it.
Yeah.
This seems very different than that.
Right.
And I would think that's a good comp to give people. I would almost want to say, here's that. Because I think that's what people think of. Oh, I drive half mile up the road, I see that thing. This versus that, I think would give people some perspective on the change.
And the new one going in Kingston, isn't that kind of, it's up on a hill.
Kingston's right
with
there.
Oh, yeah, that's
your- It's right on the highway.
Can't miss that.
But again, it's right on the highway, it's probably a good spot for it.
But it looks bigger.
In all dimensions, it's half the size.
You know, it's interesting you say that, Pat. That one off 3 is half the size, but I'm sure just because it's right in your face on the side of the highway, you would think of it as bigger than you'll think of this.
Yeah.
Plus
Because
you're looking kind of up
you got
at
it.
it.
Hogs all your sightline.
So that's what we have to present. We're happy to talk about anything else or answer any questions you might have.
Anybody?
I keep talking, I don't know.
I'm more interested right now on a timeline. I mean, we're talking about some zoning changes. The biggest one is the 65 feet. We have to change consider changing the zoning bylaw for the height in the green business park, which is where this is. And this is the only green business park in Carver, and this will be the only place where this zoning change will take effect. It won't be that we have 65-foot buildings everywhere else. It is, or up to, I should say, up to 65 feet. Only in this industrial area, which is exactly where town meeting said it should be. But the timelines, as far as you're continuing on your due diligence, how much more, where else do you still have to go? Is it negotiations, obviously talking to the chief, obviously talking to Water District? What else? Planning board, the planning board supports the articles, and you haven't been to them yet. We haven't been to them yet. We have to have we sent the zoning changes to KP Law, right? And we haven't had a report back from them yet. Okay.
Yeah, I think from a timing perspective, it's you know, looking at the process to get to town meeting and, you know, coming up with a date this year that we think, you know, we can pull off. And then we'll work from there to hit planning board meetings, board of selectmen meetings, and then the like that we need to get there. while at the same time, again, kind of finalizing an outreach campaign,
Yeah,
sharing information with the public and so on to build the momentum to, have a shot at getting that approved. But, if that meeting's in, November at this point, I don't, it's really a date that, you guys can get comfortable with, that we can make. And I think y'all are also reviewing sort of a, we tried to lay out a process, the steps we think to get
right,
there.
based on the hearing process
Right.
and what they need, what, the select board needs for articles, and what we need, what the planning board needs. It's a whole process.
Yeah. And then from, longer term from there, once, assuming we can get through that process, then, we turn around just as soon as we could and make a formal site plan submittal and get that process going, and
Get that process started.
really trying to be ready to go.
Because
under
again,
construction as soon as we could.
once, assuming that town meeting is amenable to this project, you still have the entire site plan review, you still have conservation to go through, you still have the North Carver Water District. There's still a very lot of pieces of the puzzle to go through. So it's not, a vote at town meeting, you get to put a shovel in the ground.
Exactly.
So I just want to kind of make that clear.
And, it would have been nice to be able to do them concurrently, but again, without some of the zoning relief,
Yeah.
we know we can't submit certain things.
And again, this space was designated by town meeting for something like this. It was designated for a warehouse distribution center. At the time, the state-of-the-art was just a big box building kind of thing. And even those have issues as far as what we can provide in fire safety, water, and as such, but those are as of right. So this kind of not out of the box, but this kind of thing that needs a little bit more tweaking by zoning is something that brings us to state of the art, which I think when you're doing a new project is probably the place you want to be. Anybody else?
Yeah, I have a couple
Yeah.
questions. First of all, on the zoning, when I was reading it, a lot of it looked antiquated, and it probably needs to be changed. Is that something that you're going to help us to do, to get the right wording in there? The other thing is, what if we can't really get everything ready and for the fall, and we have to go to the spring town meeting? What is that gonna do?
Go ahead, Mac.
Are you saying
No,
goodbye?
you're welcome to take that one.
Are you saying goodbye?
Well, I think we have aligned interests here. And that when we go to, if we're able to get approved at town meeting, Route 44 kind of goes away. They're
Definitely,
gone.
yeah.
If we can't get to town meeting, I'm still dealing with them.
You still what?
I'm still dealing with them.
them.
You're still dealing with us?
Well, I'm still dealing with Route 44.
Oh, with 44, I'm sorry.
So,
I really need
is that-
can I have EMA? Sorry.
But, so that's we want them in the rearview mirror. We
Okay,
want to move forward with the town as Hillwood. And just like the chief mentioned, you got the buyer, you got the seller, and you got the town. Well, we want to get as soon as possible, we want to get to the point where you got a developer and you got the town. And we'll stand by our record. And we have a good record. I can impress this upon you. But it makes it difficult on us if we can't get to town meeting in the fall. I'm just being candid, and that's the only way I know how to be. It's just,
We appreciate candid.
okay, so
Yeah,
it's gonna be better for all of us.
I don't disagree with that, but things that I think about as somebody who lives in town, you know, Matt, you said something before about meeting the building code when it comes to fire safety, but, I mean, as a citizen, I want to make sure that whatever we're doing as a plan isn't an MVP, and I don't mean most valuable player, I mean minimally viable product. You know, how do we know that we're not going to end up, and Chief, I don't know all the details, but I don't think anybody wants a 5-day event. Not that we think that would happen, but in a worst case scenario, everybody wants a 5-day event down in North Carver, right? So how do we know that what we're doing isn't scaled to meet the minimum barrier of entry, but instead is scaled to put the town in a position to be safe as it possibly can be? And I've read the report that came out relative to the fire safety things, and I mean, in my job, I do things like go through SLAs, work with clients to talk about what meets the requirements, what doesn't. I don't want to meet requirements, I want to exceed requirements. I want people to know that if something happens, we're not going to be in a disaster zone. That really is the most important thing. When you talk about getting to town meeting, frankly, 75 people-ish are going to be choosing here.
There were
and-
50 people
Fair enough, and they're-
decide, but 75 have to show up.
There we go, but that number of people is going to have to decide. And if they feel like we're getting this close,
Let
that's going to be tough.
I'd like to respond.
Sure.
And I'd go back to what Sharon said, this is just the first step
Yeah.
to address zoning. So we're gonna have to come back for site plan approval. And we fully appreciate that we have to meet every requirement for site plan approval. We have to meet every requirement for Conservation Commission approval. We have to meet every requirement for a building permit. So the decision that's made at town meeting just changes the code to say that the height restriction is increased here. But particularly those 3 steps, site plan approval, Conservation Commission, building permit, we have to meet criteria from the DEP. We have to meet criteria from the DOT, just to name a few. We're just barely getting started when we get to town meeting, and we fully expect that all of those reviews are very robust. And like I said, we've been doing this for a long time. We anticipate that each one of those reviews is going to hold us accountable to meet every letter of the code for each of those steps. So the die is not cast. We have a long way to go, but you have to eat the elephant one bite at a time.
Sure.
And that's what's happening with the town meeting and the height restriction.
If I might add a point, though, and I appreciate that, but my theory being that that's the gentleman who's got to feel good about it. And he's got to be the gentleman to convince, because I'll speak for myself as a citizen, I would look to the chief to tell me what he thinks makes sense. And if we can't get him to feel comfortable, which right now is what I'm hearing, we got a long row to hoe.
Well, I think that that's part of the reason we're all here
Sure,
tonight.
yes.
And part of the reason that it's hard for any fire and safety, and it's hard for the RDA to work with abstracts. What might be there? We could build this, it might be this. We can't stand up in front of town meeting as the board that's kind of in charge of this and say we're 100% in favor of this if we don't have complete fire and safety, if the water district doesn't feel that they can accomplish what you need. So we need all those pieces to come together in 3 months. And that's what I think. I mean, we've all sat at town meeting, and if a person in authority, whether it be our school committee or our police chief or our fire chief, says, I can't support this, it goes down. I mean, the
That's
assembly,
creative.
whether
That's
it's 75 people or 126, that carries a lot of weight. And that's the point we're trying to get to.
Yeah, if I took my devil's advocacy hat back off, and I thought about this from a different perspective, how do we trade on, I mean, look, we know you guys have done this before, how do we trade on what you've done for so long to say, here's enough information to get everybody feeling good? And I feel like in my opinion, I feel like maybe right now we're not doing that. We're talking about what it might do. Well, if you've done as many of these as I know you have, then how do we take that information and build a plan that does what you just said? Puts
And I think
everybody in a
that-
position.
And
to
I
do
think
that.
that's where we're trying to get,
Sure.
so.
I vote for let's get there.
Chief?
Yeah, I think that's a great discussion, and again, I understand the intricacies of the project, and I think what, as a fire department, and I can only speak for the fire department, we're trying to look for some guarantees on, that we can hang our hat on as the project moves forward. And you have to understand our perspective that once we change zoning, we've changed zoning, and for a height. And Hillwood might not be here 2 years from now. But we've changed zoning for 65 feet, okay? So we're not looking at this project anymore, we're looking at a hotel, or we're looking at a casino, or we're looking at something that triggers things that we don't know about. And so I think those are solvable things, but I think, like the gentleman said, I think we need some guarantees, whether that's a legal guarantee, whether it's a legal document, a living document that allows us to understand that this is where we're gonna be if this project gets built, and these are the guarantees that'll be in place, and we move through them as they go in a timely fashion. But there is a fear out there, and I certainly from the public safety side, what if it doesn't all materialize and we've changed everything? So I think that definitely has to be addressed through some things. We make an agreement with Hillwood that Hillwood is gonna provide X amount of equipment and sell certain public safety concerns, and the town agrees 65 feet in height, and then Hillwood, economy crashes, something happens, Hillwood, we're not doing this project anymore, and we're looking at a different customer that says, well, that agreement was with Hillwood, it was not with us. And so, but you're stuck. And so that's just a reasonable concern. I would just say.
I hear you loud and clear. The only point I wanted to make is, and we're committed to work this out, is that we still have to meet every criteria under your site plan approval before we can take the next step. We have to meet all the water authority, the DEP, the MassDOT. We have to meet each one of these before we can put the first shovel in the ground. And we're committed to it, and it's very typical for this to go in this sort of chronological order where the site plan approval is really the big one, and we can't move forward without that. The zoning doesn't give us the right to move forward at all. It is the site plan approval. And so we expect to meet all of your criteria at each step of the way. And we can be stopped at each step of the way.
Yeah.
And I think just as a follow-up, as we move forward with the different boards that we're gonna have to present to and report back to the RDA, the sooner we can get to where we need to be, the sooner that becomes a more positive experience for everybody, including yourself, that we need to get there.
Yep.
We need to get there. And I don't know how that's done legally, or, I mean, we will tell you what our concerns are, we'll re-express them, and we'll show you examples, and we'll try to meet you somewhere that we feel good about, but it's words right now, and we really need to get to some guarantees, I think, to make everyone, and then move on, so that you can move on, and we can start to move on. So.
And I think you have a good point, Chief, about changing the height, because we're only gonna change it for the one district. But a point, the economy crashes. Jeff Bezos apparently,
You have to live with it.
he lost his money and Amazon will not be coming. But by having our town council review it, and, when I speak with them, these are all points that will be brought up. What happens if,
I don't think these are unusual points that I
No.
think, if and I don't have the expertise, but anyways, but I think if you will find another large project, these are agreements that are typically made, whether it's a developer's agreement, or some
Yeah.
term, and they're just gonna be worded in a way that protects us. That's all I'm saying. So,
we're working with you hand in hand.
okay. Thank you.
Is there anything else?
I'd like to just,
I've been waiting for you.
I know you have. I always wait to the end, because I listen first. I want to just go on to something that Joanna mentioned about what would happen if there was a delay to the spring meeting, or annual town meeting, not the special town meeting, if one was called in the fall. I think a special town meeting in the fall could perhaps be more problematic if that is the only article that is on the town meeting warrant. There is a very vocal, active, and mobile group of negative people in this town who don't like change. And that certainly is their right. But they would have the ability probably to stack the deck in a town meeting to perhaps vote against this. It's harder to get people that are for something than it is to get those who are against it. And the concern that I think some of us on this board have is that this gets put in front of town meeting, and a town meeting it's the only thing town meeting is voting for. And the auditorium is just filled with people who have heard misinformation. And I know that we're talking about doing some kind of an outreach program to get all the right information out there, but you can't unhear misinformation, and people have a tendency at times to make that their only decision element. So I think there's a lot of work to do in a short time to try to get a fall meeting. I think if this were to be put to the spring meeting that has an awful lot of articles on it, you're going to have a broader representation of the citizens of this town, because they're all going to be there to vote on other things. They're going to be there to vote on this town budget, on the school budget, on planning board issues. It's going to bring in a different type of person, not a person who is singularly for or against a particular article that's on the warrant. And it's just a concern I have, and I think that we've talked about this before. I don't know if we know if there are going to be other articles on the warrant yet.
I don't think so.
We're not hearing that there are many out there, and trying to fill in articles that maybe can wait till spring just to make it worthwhile to have a fall meeting may fall flat in not being able to bring a different audience out, or an audience to offset the potential audience that are the naysayers. So,
I totally appreciate what you're saying, and I understand it completely. That we're going to be one of one is not a really good place to be when you're doing something that could be viewed as controversial, or
yeah,
it's a big change for a small town. We recognize that, and I'm striving to have that flexibility
We
to
want
go
to put
to
it in the best possible position.
Yeah.
we do. We want to have the best possible outcome, the most votes, the most voters, the most residents who are there for other things, to sit and listen, or hopefully walk in the door already knowing the facts and make an informed decision based on what they've already learned about it, instead of being asked to come for a particular reason, for a particular vote.
Plus, it would give us more time for PR. That's really what I'm thinking of. If I was at a Springtown meeting, I could tell them, 3 to 5 million is coming in here, guys. This is going to lower your budget, or it's going to raise your budget, or lower your taxes. We're not going to soft pedal it, but reality is we could tell them at that particular time. That's why I kept mentioning it. To me, it's a short amount of time for us to do a lot of PR work. I know you guys are doing some good work, and we'll continue with it. That's why I asked the question. I don't want you to say goodbye, but
I have as you understand, I'm under contract with Route 44. They have expectations of when they want their money. And they'd like to have it sooner than later.
Yeah, like yesterday.
Thank you. Just saying, but that, you know, I'm just being candid, and I understand that I got a better shot in the spring than I do in the fall. I totally get that.
Right, and, you know, the project that you're looking to do is going to bring a lot more benefit, not only to the town and to your company but also to Route 44.
Good.
So,
Go ahead.
You know, I think that, all in all, this has been a lot of very well-intentioned and very well-thought-out things said. But we've got one commonality between us, I think, and it talks, and you can talk about timeframes, you can talk about pushing it, you can talk about anything else. We got one chance to get this right. And that's how I look at it.
Yeah.
So we've got to do everything that we can to make sure that chance, whether it's in the spring or whether it's in the fall or whenever it is, that we maximize that chance. And we've got a mutual interest in that.
Indeed.
And again, it's having the people who speak on behalf of the project have better information and correct information in the best interest of the town versus the people who might speak against it. Again, it comes to the chief, fire chief, police chief, the fire and safety. We're starting a fiscal impact study, I believe, with Judy Barrett tomorrow. All that's good information that will be used. So again, it's been a real concern between Savory and I, talking about how it has to be, it can't be rushed, it has to be finessed, because the town meeting voters will have their opinions, and some of them will have researched it to death, and some of them will hear what is said on the floor. And we need to be able to cover everybody. And like I said, the quorum is 75, we need 2/3. So,
what we really should be aiming to do is not trying to get the 2/3, it's to get 100%.
to get 100%.
You know, we've got to settle those naysayers on the fact that this is good for them and good for Carver. Then we have nothing to worry about. You know, we don't have to worry about stacking the deck or not having enough, and we don't have to bite our fingernails all the way through the meeting. We want to make sure that we've got everybody in town behind this. And, you know, I frankly don't think that we can do that in the next 2 months, 3 months.
Yeah.
I just,
And another point of fact is when we talked about outreach to Plimpton, there were representatives from Plimpton Select Board and abutters at our last meeting.
Oh, yeah.
They organized when the original URP came in, and they will organize again. So it's imperative, we've mentioned it before, that outreach to Plimpton, go to their select board meeting, go to, you know, you're gonna have to, I have the email of Christine Joy, and you definitely have to start mobilizing with them, not us. I mean, we can be in support staff, but Plimpton has to know, because they are abutters. And we can say, well, you didn't check with us when Cisco went in, but, and it's still a Carver project, but good neighbors, good, I mean, they have outreach just as well, and those people can just as easily show up. So, is there anything else? Do you have any questions? This has been great. I love the renderings. Those are just what we were looking for. And when you get them all together, we'd like to have them, because we're trying to put together, and we'll discuss it later in the meeting, but we're trying to put together the kind of our own startup, our own outreach and website and something like that.
Sharon,
So-
I have a question. CCAT is cable for us. They have a studio, and we could go in that studio, and we could create, you know, a visual or whatever. They would tape it and so forth, and they would play it on and Would your team be willing, if we said, yeah, we can set something up, and would you or your guys here be willing to do what you just did here? So you could just go back and people could look at it all the time they wanted. Actually, they could probably look at this one real quick in about a week.
We'd be very happy to participate.
Yeah, that'd be great, because they have the studio, it's all set up, and if you have Comcast, you get to see it for free. It's on channel 15, so it's a good start.
Well, this meeting will be on it, so,
Well, yeah, they could see this here
They'll see
in
this.
3-4 days. We could-
Huh?
YouTube.
on YouTube too.
YouTube, yes, we could do that.
Can't get the Red Sox though.
You can't,
I was thrilled, I was saving so much money getting YouTube TV and you can't get the Red Sox at all.
I had to bail on YouTube TV.
I can't wait for you guys to float the balloons, that's what I want to see.
Actually,
And I want to come off of 44, and I want to I'm going to test it.
these are televised.
well, at the end of this meeting, we'll set our next meeting, and I'll make sure everybody knows. I have some other things to move on to concerning the Yorkie, so if anyone else has any more questions directly, either for the chief or for Hillwood. you
So
can-
Sharon, would you be setting the next walkthrough for the public to come like they did?
We'll talk about that next time.
Okay.
Yeah. Because we talked about doing it kind of in the fall as soon as school got started and everybody got,
Can we talk about outreach just for a second before you?
absolutely.
You had talked about doing some kind of outreach. I know that we have to work together on this. Where do you stand on putting any kind of presentation together that we could throw onto the town website regarding Hillwood's history, other projects, so that there's stuff out there explaining to the townspeople who you are, your successes, and your track record, your acceptance in other towns and what you've done for them. I think we had talked about that a few meetings ago.
No, well, 2 weeks ago when we were at
Right, but-
just the Hillwood.
But I think that when the call I was on the Zoom,
Yeah, when you
we
were,
talked about.
when you were on
doing that.
computer.
Yeah.
So we are, the last meeting that we had, we were targeting the 23rd, which I believe is today on the website.
Right.
We've got, that is in progress, and there kind of some legal hurdles to jump through to get all that finalized. I'm hoping the website will be, that name and all will be set up this week, and then we'll start to populate it. We've taken the frequently asked questions. We've pulled from all of our other groups, and we've kind of got all this massive information now that we need to, once we get the website up, then we'll start kind of slowly populating. And then, my intent was to kind of, give you some sort of a summary of, hey, here's all the information we think is useful.
Okay.
And then we can kind of talk about, what y'all's opinion are, what means a lot to you, what you think doesn't mean much, and
I think more is
yeah.
better.
More is better.
Yeah, so
And,
there's-
things like the renderings we saw tonight, those would be great. And anything that we do further, we've talked about an oversight, a drone flyover of just what it looks like now. Because there's a lot of people who haven't ever been out there.
If they don't even know the name.
And, yeah.
Montello
and-
Street, they go, where's that?
Yeah, you just tell us where the new Dunkin' Donuts
The
is.
balloons.
But a drone flight just showing the sheer size of the lot, a lot of people simply don't understand it.
Yep.
And it's hard, if you're not really visual, you see a map and you see the red outline, but that doesn't really,
No sense of
it doesn't
scale.
really compute to
Right.
The perception.
the acres of empty, sand and gravel that are there, and the stump pile and all of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You get it? No.
Sure.
Okay.
And we did do some drone flights that we have that info, we just gotta pull it all together.
Just
So-
gotta pull it all together, and if you can pull it all together and get it to Savory, we can use it.
Savory, you're the point person.
I guess.
Well, he's on the way.
I vote for
And
Savory.
Jim, because
Yeah,
we gotta set up the link here.
but we're gonna move on to a couple of other things now, is there?
Okay, I'm done. Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
if you guys.
So we thank you for coming.
Thanks for coming out.
Thanks, Chief.
And we'll see a lot more of you, I'm sure. You too,
Thanks,
Chief.
We risk life and limb with this hurricane.
Yeah, you have.
Thanks very much.
I stood my chair back up that blew off my deck, and
I know.
it's gonna be tough to rebuild, but I will. Well, it was a rocking chair, it just blew all the way over across.
It's easy enough.
I'm glad it went west.
Yeah, but it's coming back tonight with rain.
Well, that's it. I took more water out of my pool than I put in the whole season.
I looked this morning at the track. And the track this morning, look where it was. There's Wareham, there's Carver.
All right.
Blue line is.
Moving on.
God, right between
Yeah,
us.
Wareham Street.
Oh, yeah.
Might as well.
Wow. It rains in different areas of Carver, that's for sure. No doubt about that. Well, anyway, this is,
All right, the next things I have,
I wanted to be here though.
the next thing I have is,
Take care, thank you.
thank you, on Hillwood is, well, we've really kind of touched on it, and I wanted to bring up the Paul Kelly,
oh, good.
but we kind of touched on it, so that's the next thing I had under
Okay.
things to discuss as well.
Oh, great, okay. Is that on now?
Yep.
Oh, okay, great. I made a few, I said to Sharon that I wanted to take on that challenge to find somebody that could do marketing. And I found him, Paul Kelly. Paul Kelly is a marketing professional, has been that's what he does. And I spoke directly with him, and I knew we were going to be here tonight, and he apologized, but his family's all getting together, and he asked if he would not be here, but maybe if we made another arrangement for him to come, he would come. But here's the point. Paul Kelly, his wife is the director of the Council on Aging, and he's taken up a lot of the challenge about 5 aspects. And the first one is he put up a YouTube where he took the videos and just about what we were talking about tonight. And he built a Facebook page where there's a link back to the YouTube and so forth. And the other thing is CCAT. He works directly and all the time with Ron Clark and CCAT with Rob Goulet, is that his last name? Rich Goulet. Goulart. And Paul reminded me that there's a studio there, which I said tonight that you could have all of the gatherings you wanted to film, and it would be on CCAT. The other thing too about a website, he built a website for the Friends of Carver COA. But he also lives in this town, and so he has a stake in it as well. And I told him he would have to work with Savory.
He knows me.
And he says he knows you. And I've had a lot of experience with Paul because I worked with Sarah Ewens when she was running for rep. And he did all of her marketing, and he did a very, very good job. So I want to make that recommendation. I even went so far, working with Craig Corbo to get the agreement, the developer agreement, ready to go. And we can talk about that in a little bit. But Paul Kelly pointed out 2 things to me. First of all, CCAT is good for the older people, like me. And Facebook is good for the younger people, social media, YouTube as well. So it kind of grabs everybody. And so I thought that was an important aspect of how we're going to reach out to let our townspeople know, the young and the old, going forward. So I just wanted to make that presentation to you people to see how you felt.
Jim, the email we have from, is it Claire?
Mm-hmm, yes.
When they're talking about the public relations, were they talking about essentially the same thing, or what?
Yeah, so it would encompass, doing the website work. So these companies, Stantec is a large company, and so they do a lot of like community master plans or kind of large scale projects like downtown revitalization plans, where they would need kind of a public outreach component. And so, so Claire suggested two of the firms that were on our list from previous, as consulting firms, that two of these are firms that would either have their own in-house capability to do that, or they would, contract with a subcontractor who would provide those services.
And the reason for them to be hired would solely be for community outreach.
Well, so some of these two firms could also do other things that we're also looking for, to help advise the redevelopment authority on the kind of the project or the proposal. So
it's the kind of the consultant that we were talking about to help us oversee all these
different little pieces.
many little pieces that are going in so many different directions.
And they also have two of these firms also have the capability of doing kind of the public outreach management, that type of thing. I think even Judy Barrett does that, but ever since she's already hired by
She's already hired by Hillwood.
Hillwood, so
Which one is hired by Hillwood?
Judy Barrett.
Consulting. She's going to be here tomorrow talking about the economic development fiscal impact study.
She's going to do a fiscal impact study for Hillwood.
So Claire's list of four are what we asked her to provide, which is the consultant to help us walk through the whole process.
Right.
And two of those four have the PR
That's correct.
component to them, okay.
So do we feel we need to interview? What are we doing
Are you doing this with the chief? Not the
No,
chief, the...
This is us. This is just the RDA.
Rick's meeting?
No,
Is this Rick?
no.
No, okay.
Well, I think we should get them in.
I think we definitely need to do some interviewing. So I need to switch classes. I think we should at least interview, say, one from each pile, or interview the two with the
Which ones of the four we...
Stantec and Horsley
Stantec and
Witten.
Horsley Witten.
Yeah, I think there's pros and cons to having them be together. I mean, some are pretty self-explanatory, but some people might feel like if the consultant is also doing the outreach, is there too much concentrated in one basket there?
Well, I think first we have to see what these people can do for us, right?
Yes.
Okay, first, so I think we need to interview them just to see what it is we're looking for and what it is they can provide. Right, Jim? Do you think that's what we should be looking for? The public outreach, either by building a website, maybe with Paul. We can interview him separately after we check with these people. We have to get
Well, I think we get Paul in here
ASAP.
sooner,
Okay,
sooner than later.
so we could take the PR component out of this?
No,
Or
no, I'm thinking that we utilize Paul
Paul to build websites for us? Or,
to start getting our messaging out
okay,
early.
okay.
Which you can
Giving us
easily
the
do.
time to interview these other
Exactly.
two,
Right.
figure out what they want to do. Now, Jim, I have a question for you. If Paul were to build a website for the RDA or for this project, specifically for this project, could that be loaded onto the Carver webpage?
Right, I think it could. So
All right.
it's just a matter of,
Can I ask,
having
That'd
the
be a
technical ability to,
Well, we
or
want-
not the technical, but the, legal ability to just
so,
access
can
that
I,
site.
can I?
Legal ability to
Let me-
link the two.
can
Right, from the town, authorizing him to, access.
I
the
asked,
website.
I asked Paul about that, and he said that he has a point person that he uses for loading things up onto the Carver website,
The town of Carver.
Town of Carver,
Okay.
and he's not sure whether they can do videos. But here what I was gonna do tomorrow. I was gonna talk to Rick LaFawn directly and ask him who their contact is, because Elaine told me they have the IT people that they work with, which I'm assuming is the town side of that part
No,
of
we
it.
don't, so the website is a different piece.
Different,
And typically, it's town employees that are uploading information, but it's generally like the agenda, putting the event, an event into the calendar on there, and not really loading videos or other kinds of things. And one of our challenges is that we just don't have enough bandwidth in the office right now to do that stuff.
Okay, so I wanted to circumvent that, knowing what you just said to be
Right.
true. Here's what I wanted to do, talk to Rick tomorrow. Rick, this is what I need to have. I need to have a point person that I physically go and see or talk to that comes under that direction, that we can hand off this information and they're going to do it.
Right, I think
That's
that's
what-
what we talked about
Okay.
last week at the
I
meeting.
don't see that to be an issue because
to have
even
a-
Paul Kelly said he had the same idea and he has a person at the school that he just offloads all the stuff to that person and that person puts it up on a Carver page for the
Right,
Council
so-
on Aging.
Okay, so we don't have, we have someone who can do a little bit of that stuff, but they're only a 12-hour employee,
Right,
So
so
the-
I'm trying to circumvent
12 hours a
that.
week?
12-hour-a-week employee.
Yeah, I would
So we need
certainly-
we would need a person,
Yeah,
so he's feeding someone who's in this, already working for the town,
right.
but we don't have someone in the town that's able to do that.
We
So
don't need a
we would
person.
But we
if-
would need him or another authorized person to do that work for us.
Right, which he could
on our
handle
behalf.
easy, Let me have a try at it, Jim, and I'll come back to the committee real quick.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, because, if you go on the Carver website, there is a menu of things that you can look for. And on that needs to be
Right,
Montello Street Development.
right,
As
exactly.
its own thing, not
Right.
under RDA, not under
Right.
planning,
That's right.
it's gotta be its own link. And on that, what we'll need Paul to do is not only build that page, but also maintain it and add links to other information as it comes up.
That's true.
And also the frequently asked questions. We're going to need to have the FAQ section where the residents of town have the ability to ask a different question, a
Yeah.
question that's not on the list. And then Paul, as a maintainer, is going to have to alert us, or any one of us.
So that sounds like Facebook to me.
No.
No, we
it's-
don't want it to be Facebook.
You don't answer the questions on Facebook. You direct the people
No.
on Facebook to the website.
Okay, I
Because-
understand that.
So,
I understand.
the website needs to be, whoever's monitoring the website needs to know when questions come in. They have to get the questions to us so that we can either answer them or find the person who knows the answer
Okay.
and then answer them, then give them back to that person to be put on the website.
All right, let
Because
me,
we're not gonna answer any questions on Facebook, on social media. We're gonna answer every question with one answer, and that is the information you want can be found here. Town of Carver / Montello
yeah,
Street
go,
Project,
okay, so I understand. So let me go to work tomorrow
okay?
and I'll get back to you.
All right,
All right, and Paul, to your point about, do we want to have the same company do both? Every time we have a meeting, it seems like there's another group involved, and communication is an issue. So if we can keep it to one group, I think that's gonna help, because we're starting to get spiders' legs out to everything. So if we can find one company that can do both, I think that we kind of dump it in their lap and say, okay.
Agreed. I agree with you. I was thinking more from a perspective of, and maybe I'm overthinking it, but I'm thinking more of a perspective of the consumer of the information. Does somebody know that the person who is the consultant for the project is also providing the information on the outreach on the project, and draw a line there and say, how much am I listening to what's going on here, given the person who's giving me that info? I like having it be the same person. Will
I
consume
think-
but if they're working for us,
Right, I think the disciplines are so
Yeah.
far apart that it's not gonna be an issue.
yeah.
And I'm sure that it'll be two separate people. There will
Oh,
be the
sure.
PR person and there'll be the consultant who's helping us through the entire process.
So should we set up interviews with
Well, I think we get Paul in here as soon as we can.
Well, get Paul in here as soon as you can.
Yeah, but then I would focus on the two.
Yes,
The two that they said.
yeah.
Do you want me to contact the email here?
The one, yes. I would do that. That's the,
Kelly, is he related to Connie Kelly, is that it?
Paul Kelly is
Yes.
Connie Kelly's son.
Yeah, it's for his,
Okay.
yeah, the husband.
So do you want, does the board want me to contact Stanek and Horsley Witten under the, and set up interviews?
I would say so, yeah.
Okay.
Please.
That's the way to go.
Should we set it up for the next meeting, whatever that should be?
Sure.
Does the whole board want to be here for that?
Probably the book, but
Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
if we've got the time. I mean, I know we're,
Have the time. Once we're here.
sorry, no, I meant if we have the time to spare
Oh,
in our timeline.
well, I'm
to wait that
thinking-
long.
I think so.
Okay.
Because what we're gonna ask them to do, and this will give us time to think about what we're gonna need them to do, as far as our consultant for the project and a public relations consultant. So, and then we also have to find out how much this is gonna cost, which leads me to the, on the agreement for paying the consultant.
Yep, I've got this agreement here.
I'm going down here.
You getting it?
Yep, well, no, that's kind of the next thing under the Hillwood thing, so.
Okay, good. Tell me when you're ready.
I'm ready.
Oh, okay.
Does anyone have any questions about the consultants, talking to Paul Kelly, and we'll bring a member of the other two parties in for an interview? Okay.
Good to me.
And then, so, what we're gonna discuss now
So,
under,
yeah, here's the agreement, I.
so
this is the-
this, I printed off the one you sent me today.
Yeah, but since that time, Greg Kerbo came to talk with Rick, and Rick tonight, or Jim, in our package of handouts, gave us the one that is the new, complete, final.
So it's not this one?
No, it's
The
not
one
that
that's
one.
stapled?
It's
The
the
new one?
one that's stapled right here.
Oh, never mind.
Yeah, okay. So this started with the original that went to the chief and the final, I should say the final that went to the chief. When I saw it, I said, yep, throw out the other one, this is the one we want. And so I worked very closely with Rick several times to put in where we needed to have RDA, where we needed to have the urban renewal plan, where we needed MIPA, and where we needed DHCD. And by doing that, we came up with this final draft. Now, you haven't really read it, haven't really looked at it.
No, we got it tonight, so.
You need it tonight, and you need to look at it,
So
and
we
you
need
need
to
to
look
come
at
up
it.
with some problem. Rick told me that Hillwood, the guy's name is Gary, was he sitting in here?
Yes.
Yeah.
The one with the gray shirt, okay. When he was presented that, it was only a matter of a week